Okay, so when you're ready.
Urbanization has been a growing trend with a significant impact on many aspects of life, especially within developing nations. Even though urbanization can influence positive growth if it is done the right way, it can also be detrimental in important areas of a country. Hi, my name is Jenna Davis, and the following information brought forth my question. What strategies could be used to even out the growing trend of urban development as opposed to rural development? As defined by the Conservation Institute, urbanization is when people move from rural farmland to cities and towns with greater population numbers. Rural areas are not as densely packed and found in towns with lower population numbers that focus more on natural resources. A new developing world has led to the decrease of rural development. A journal article written by Richard Florida, an American studies theorist, claims that developing countries are experiencing the greatest amount of urbanization in human history. Mark R. Montgomery explains just how much urbanization is taking place in these countries with this statement. By 2050, fully 2/3 of inhabitants in major regions of the developing world are likely to live in urban areas. In order to understand this growing trend of urbanization, you need to become aware of the many causes. Mark R. Montgomery also uncovered the 3 factors behind the increasing trend of urbanization: globalization, evolving international development strategies, and the urban implications of global climate change. Globalization presents an issue because of the decentralization of the governments in poor countries, which puts more responsibility on the local and city governments. International development strategies are used to accomplish the Millennium Development Goals, which influence urbanization by recognizing rural and urban poverty. Global climate, however, is influenced by urbanization, putting large coastal cities at risk of extreme weather events. These 3 points lead into the various effects that urbanization has on not only developing countries, but on a global scale. There are many different effects that arise due to urbanization, and I've grouped them into 3 categories: economic, social, and environmental. In Petropolis Now, Leo Johnson addresses a problem of urbanization, the demand for jobs, seeing as about 200,000 people are moving out of the countryside per day, which ends up resulting in the failure of crops, as well as a decline in the amount of agricultural jobs available. Another economic issue from urbanization is addressed in the Journal of Applied Science and Environmental Management. Sunday P. Ajara and Aisha Abubakar state that a problem with such fast urbanization in developing countries is that these underdeveloped countries do not have the amount or type of infrastructure and buildings in order to compensate such an increase in city populations that other developed nations have. Slums are overpopulated areas or districts where mainly very poor people live and are a very significant effect of urbanization as well as extensive poverty. This brings my next category of effects: social. The growing poverty in slums lead to many health problems in individuals, such as cardiovascular or respiratory diseases. People living in slums are also not likely to have access to things such as suitable amounts of nutrition or public health education. Researchers at the Institute for Social Medicine looked into urbanization and health in developing countries and compared them to those in rural areas. One point made was that there were prevalent risk factors for chronic diseases in urban areas that even impacted multiple health outcomes. Another major factor that leads to these health risks is the environmental effects that urbanization has. Developing countries do not have the types of government systems that developed countries have, which could lead to an increase in pollution because of inadequate waste management, domestic water supply, or electric power supply. With urbanization being related to increasing numbers of people in metropolitan areas and cities, its effects on the environment can be compared to Margaret Thatcher's speech to the United Nations General Assembly, where Thatcher talks about the global environment and the growing negative impacts on it, especially since the Industrial Revolution, which also caused a huge increase in urbanization. One major impact on the environment is that there is a 3 billion ton increase of carbon dioxide annually. Accompanied with an increase in carbon dioxide, there is also a vast decrease in tropical forests, which remove 10 times more carbon dioxide than forests in the temperate zones. Earth's ozone layer is also being destroyed as a result of chlorofluorocarbons and halons. Thatcher identifies the main threat to the world's environment being an increase in people and their activities, whether it be intensively cultivating land, cutting and burning down trees, burning fossil fuels, or polluting rivers and seas. Even though the consequences of urbanization are major, some people support the success of urbanization if it can be done the right way. In an article from Petropolis Now, Leo Johnson states that if these cities are done right, they will have the ability to supply affordable housing, construction jobs, and be a model for the next generation of smart cities. American professor Richard Florida takes a completely different kind of perspective by correlating people's happiness and income with urbanization. This is because income increases happiness and urbanization tends to increase income levels. Even though there are some positives to urbanization, you see that negatives still outweigh the positives. With so many consequences resulting from urbanization, there has to be some sort of solution that will improve effects that have already occurred to help prevent new ones or others that people already see coming. The Pakistan Journal of Science helps as far as the overpopulation issues of urbanization by stating that there needs to be different urbanization patterns which could be influenced by compact-based development or balanced urbanization. Technologies that would provide access to things such as telecommunication information, which could also be used in order to slow the rate of urbanization in developing countries. There would also need to be adequate resources and infrastructure in order to compensate for the increasing number of people in developing cities and metropolitan areas. Economic and Political Weekly had an article about the developmental impacts of urbanization, which addresses the fact that urbanization and migration are recognized under the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Knowledge Platform describes what exactly the 11th SDG does. The 11th SDG makes sure that there is adequate housing and other infrastructure that will support the growing populations of developing nations, decreases the number of environmental disasters that recur as a result of urbanization, pays special attention to air quality, and gives access of affordable and safe systems for transportation. Even though these solutions seem so perfectly fit to address the issues of urbanization, there are also limitations. Technology, resources, and infrastructure all require a significant amount of money and would require even more for each developing nation in need of these things. For developing nations, acquiring that type of money is not easy. Changing urbanization patterns would also not be easy because in order to change these, there would need to be a large-scale event which would ultimately be hard to control and would eventually become left out of someone's hands and left up to chance. In conclusion, not only will solutions cost money that developing nations do not have, but there are also solutions that are uncontrollable to a certain extent. Leveling out the trend of urbanization is not something that will happen overnight. Only time will show the continuance or leveling out of urbanization in developing countries. Thank you for your time.
All right. How did you select the strategies you used to gather information, and were they effective?
So first, I had to fully understand exactly what rural and urbanization was so that I could understand the many effects that I wanted to address in my paper. And after I had a full understanding of all that, it helped me come up with my solutions that I used to address all aspects of the effects that I had in my paper. I thought they ended up being successful.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged from your research, and were the questions important?
One question that I had that came up while doing my research was from Richard Florida and how he correlated, or actually Leo Johnson, and how he said that urbanization could be positive if it was done the right way. And it didn't talk a lot about what things that he meant by being done the right way, and I would like to look into that a little more and what he meant by that and how effective it would actually be.
Okay. Thank you.